Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something that honestly trips up a surprising number of organizations, getting a computerized maintenance management system, a CMMS, not just installed, but actually working the way it's supposed to.
It really does. On paper, it sounds straightforward, right? Software to manage maintenance. But looking through these sources, the reality is, wow, it's a lot more complicated than people think.
Totally. We've got a good mix of sources here. Step-by-step guides, best practices, warnings about common pitfalls, and even a really specific and, I think, critical look at data governance, especially if you're outsourcing facilities management.
Yeah, so our mission today is basically to unpack all of that, pull out the key insights you really need to navigate this whole CMMS journey successfully.
And it's a vital mission because, wow, the stats in these sources are pretty eye-opening. One mentioned over 70% of new CMMS projects fail to launch properly.
And others put the failure rate somewhere between 60 and even 80%. That's huge. It's not a small risk.
80%. So, yeah, this isn't just about choosing some software. It's about dodging a really common, potentially very expensive failure.
Exactly.
So this deep dive, hopefully, will give you a kind of roadmap to beat those odds, get the real benefits, and understand tricky areas like that data governance piece, which, like you said, is super important in regulated industries or if you use outside services.
Okay, let's dive in.
Right. So why even bother with a CMMS? What's the fundamental goal here?
Well, at its core, a CMMS is meant to be your central place, your hub for all maintenance information. And it's there to automate a lot of the management processes.
Aiming for better efficiency, better effectiveness.
That's the idea. Improved efficiency and effectiveness across your whole maintenance operation.
And the benefits listed in the sources, they sound fantastic. Things like better control over costs, making sure equipment is reliable, having one place for asset management.
Yeah, building solid preventive maintenance programs, streamlining work orders, managing inventory better. It all sounds great.
It should be a game changer, theoretically.
But that massive 60, 80% failure rate we just talked about, that tells you it's definitely not just plug and play. There's more to it than just installing software.
So what are the big reasons these projects stumble, according to the sources? The high-level view.
Several common themes pop up again and again. Projects going way over budget or taking much longer than planned. Users just not using the system. Lack of real support for management, which is critical.
Training issues, too.
Definitely. Insufficient training, or maybe just a one-off session that doesn't stick. And ultimately, the system just never becomes part of the daily workflow. It doesn't become that essential tool it's meant to be.
Understanding those failure points right at the start really underscores why the kind of structured approach the sources lay out is so important.
Absolutely vital.
Okay, so that structured approach, it actually kicks off way before you even think about which software to buy.
Yeah.
Let's talk phase one, laying the groundwork. This seems like where you set yourself up for success or failure.
Exactly right. And step one, the absolute first thing, is scooping the project properly. And this isn't just, vague ideas. It's about clearly defining your goals. What are you actually trying to achieve?
Like what specific things need tracking?
Precisely. What assets, what processes have to be in the system? Which areas need it most urgently? What features are absolute must-haves versus nice-to-haves?
And the practical stuff too. Budget, timeline.
Yes, a realistic budget and a realistic timeline. One source really hit hard on the budget point.
Oh.
Said if your budget is insufficient from the get-go, you could literally spend a ton of money and end up with nothing usable, no end product at all.
Wow. So underfunding it is basically setting it up to fail.
Pretty much. Better to scope it right, maybe even phase it, than to try and do it on the cheap and have it fall apart.
Okay, scope defined. Then you start looking at software, selecting wisely.
Right, and the advice is clear. Don't just grab the first one you see or the one someone casually mentioned. You need to actively shop around, look at different options.
And make sure the features line up with the needs you just defined in the scope, right?
Critically important. Does the functionality actually meet those specific needs?
The sources list a whole bunch of factors to consider here. It's more than just a feature checklist.
Oh, much more. Things like, is it easy to use? Will your team actually use it day to day? Can it scale up if you grow? How well does it play with other systems you already have?
Like your ERP system or maybe IoT sensors collecting data.
Exactly. Integration is key. And cost, not just the upfront price tag, but the total cost of ownership, the TCO, what's it going to cost over its entire life?
What about support? Training from the vendor.
Crucial factors. How customizable is it? Is there good mobile access for techs in the field? What are the reporting and analytics capabilities? Like, can you get the data out in a useful way?
Looking at feedback from other users seems smart too.
Definitely. And check out the vendor themselves. Do they get your industry? What's their plan for the future? And the tech side cloud versus on-premise.
It's a lot to weigh. The idea of using a scoring matrix based on your requirements sounds like a good way to keep it objective.
It really helps cut through the noise. Okay, next up, in this planning phase, getting stakeholders involved and prepping for the change. This is huge.
Yeah, the people side often gets overlooked, doesn't it?
Hugely. It's not enough for just the maintenance manager or IT to be excited. You need genuine buy-in, real awareness from managers, from the technicians who will be using it every single day, and anyone else impacted.
And you have to deal with potential fears head on.
You really do. Maybe they had a nightmare experience with software before. Or maybe they hear automation and worry about their jobs. Getting the team involved early, showing them how it benefits them, is key.
The sources had some good tips for winning over management, too, like involving them in spotting the benefits for their specific departments.
Right. Holding regular, honest update meetings, using brainstorming sessions so they feel heard, making sure everyone understands the why behind it. If you identify the project's impact early, it's easier to make the case.
Which leads nicely into defining the business requirements in real detail.
Exactly. Asking those really specific questions. What must the CMMS actually do to help you hit your goals? How many people will use it? And importantly, what's their current comfort level with technology?
Is it just for one site or multiple locations? Do you need extra modules like for purchasing? How critical is mobile access for your technicians?
And a really big strategic one, are you just trying to digitize your current, maybe inefficient paper processes? Or are you taking this chance to actually optimize how you work? That's a key decision.
And tied into that, defining your KPIs, key performance indicators, and other metrics before you even choose the system.
Absolutely critical. You need to connect your goals to things you can actually measure. And then you have to make sure the CMMS you pick can give you those measurements, those reports.
The sources mention some common ones. MTTR, mean time to repair.
How long it takes to fix something.
MTBF, mean time between failure.
How long things work before breaking again. For repairable stuff.
OEE, overall equipment effectiveness.
Right, a measure of production efficiency. PM compliance, are you getting your preventive maintenance done on time? And planned maintenance percentage, how much work is planned versus just reacting to breakdowns. And you can see the link, right? A source gave a good example. Goal is improve reliability. Requirement is the CMMS handles preventive maintenance based on time or condition. QCI you track is MTBF. It all connects.
Makes sense. Okay. Requirements and KPIs are set. Then you build the project schedule.
Define that realistic timeline. Map out the key milestones.
Sources often break it down into phases, don't they? Discovery, data migration.
Right. Discovery, data migration, training and go live, project close, and then that ongoing review, improve, refine phase. One source mentioned a timeline of about 4 weeks as an example.
But that's just an example, right? It could vary wildly.
Oh, massively. Depends entirely on how complex your project is, the scope, the state of your data. You need a realistic timeline for you.
And finally, for phase one, picking the project team. Who's actually going to drive this?
Yeah, who owns it? The team size depends on the scope, but it absolutely must have people from both maintenance and IT involved. They have to work together.
And deciding. Are you doing most of the heavy lifting in-house or relying more on the vendor or maybe a third-party consultant?
Exactly. How much vendor help do you need? Key roles mentioned are usually a project manager keeping everything on track, managing expectations, and an implementation specialist who's hands-on with the setup, the data, testing, coaching users.
Phew. Okay, that's a lot of groundwork, but it sounds essential. Now, phase two, during implementation. This is where things get real, and the sources say it can be the trickiest part.
It really can be. And a massive piece of that complexity is data migration, getting your existing information into the new system.
And whether that's smooth or a total disaster depends on the prep work.
Entirely. Did you sift through your old data? Did you clean it up? Did you organize your asset information beforehand? If not, uh-oh.
The sources suggested getting help here if needed, like vendor services or a dedicated team.
Yeah, if it looks like a mountain to climb, bringing in specialists can be money well spent.
And related to migration is data entry and cleansing. Even if you import from spreadsheets or old systems.
Expect problems. The sources are blunt. Expect garbage data.
Garbage data. What does that actually mean in practice? Like typos?
Typos, sure, but also inconsistent naming for the same equipment. Missing serial numbers or install dates. assets listed that you scrapped years ago, different formats for dates or units of measure, just junk carried over from old, messy systems.
So you have to clean it up before it goes in the new CMMS.
Absolutely. Data scrubbing, data manipulation, whatever you call it, it's non-negotiable. You need clean, reliable data going in. Otherwise, the whole system's value is undermined from day one. And you must factor time for this cleanup into your schedule. It takes longer than you think.
Makes total sense. Garbage in, garbage out, nowhere more true than here. What else is key during this phase? Communication.
Constant communication, regular check-ins with everyone involved, your internal team, managers, users, and with your CMMS provider, your account manager. Catching issues early, staying aligned, it's critical. Don't let things drift.
And that tactic of implementing incrementally, rolling it out bit by bit.
That can be really smart. Instead of a big bang launch everywhere, maybe start in one department or with one critical asset type.
Why is that helpful?
Lets you iron out the wrinkles in a smaller, more controlled setting. You can demonstrate value quickly, get some early wins, build confidence and momentum before you tackle the full rollout. Less risk, often smoother adoption.
Okay, makes sense. So let's say you navigate phase 2. The system is technically up and running, but the sources are really clear. That is not the end of the story. Which brings us to phase 3, after implementation and ongoing use, sustaining success.
Exactly. The CMMS itself needs care and feeding, just like the equipment it helps manage. It needs ongoing attention, supervision, and refinement to keep delivering value.
And the absolute number one thing here, which sources say gets skipped way too often, is training. Proper training.
And crucially, continuous training. Not just a one-and-done session when you launch.
Why continuous?
Well, systems get updated, right? Yeah. New features appear. New people join your team. People forget things they learned 6 months ago if they don't use a feature regularly. Training has to be ongoing.
Good documentation helps too, I imagine. Manuals, FAQs.
Essential. And definitely use the vendor's training resources if they offer them. The sources repeatedly draw a direct line between continuous, effective training and user adoption. Yeah. And if users don't adopt it, the whole thing fails.
Right. So people are trained, they're using the system, it's collecting data. Now what? You have to actually use that data.
You have to have a plan for it. Yep. The raw data is just data. You need to turn it into insights, generate performance reports, create visual dashboards, dig into what it's telling you.
How does that help improve maintenance?
Well, you can use it to spot trends, diagnose recurring problems with certain assets or in specific areas. You can use the real-world data coming out of the CMMS to fine-tune your preventive and predictive maintenance schedules.
Which should lead to lower costs, better safety.
Exactly. Lower costs, improved safety, longer asset life, better productivity. That's where the real payoff is.
And the financial side, too. Tracking costs.
Don't forget that. Using the CMMS data to track vendor spending, parts costs, overtime hours. It's vital for managing the maintenance budget effectively and showing how maintenance contributes to the bottom line.
After the initial chaos of go-live settles, the sources mention formal project close activities.
Yeah, it's important to pause and assess. Did the system meet the requirements you set out way back in phase 1? What went well? What went wrong? Capture those lessons learned, the good and the bad. Identify any lingering risks.
But even that isn't the end. One source called implementation, just a first step in a journey. Continuous improvement is key.
Absolutely non-negotiable for long-term value. The system needs ongoing monitoring. Talk to the users, what's working well for them, what's frustrating. Keep running those performance reports. Track those KPIs you defined.
And make changes based on that feedback.
Yes. Implement refinements. And stay plugged into your vendor. See what new releases are coming. Attend their webinars. Talk to your account manager about best practices or features you might not be using.
And then share that knowledge internally.
Crucial step. Let your team know about updates and new ways to use the system. If you don't do this continuous improvement piece, the system just stagnates and you start losing value.
Okay, now that we've walked through all those phases, let's loop back to those common pitfalls we talked about at the start, the reasons why that 60-80% failure rate exists. Following this roadmap seems like the direct antidote to those problems.
It really is. That failure rate isn't random. It stems directly from falling into these known traps. So pitfall number 1, lack of planning.
That's the entire phase 1 we just detailed, right? Mm-hmm. Rigorous scoping, requirements, selection, skipping that. Recipe for disaster.
Exactly. Pitfall 2. Implementation mishaps.
That's phase 2, tackling data migration and cleansing head-on, constant communication, testing with incremental rollouts, keeping the project schedule realistic.
Right. Pitfall 3, little to no training.
Which the sources basically say guarantees failure. So the emphasis on thorough, continuous training in phase 3 is the direct counter. Users need it to adopt the system.
Then pitfall 4, inputting low-quality data, that whole garbage in, garbage out problem.
Which is why we stress data management rules, data audits, training people on why data quality matters, and using system features like required fields to enforce integrity.
Precisely. Pitfall 5, underutilization of features.
Which usually comes back to lack of training again, or neglecting that continuous improvement piece. You have to actively show and encourage people to use the full power of the system.
Yep. Pitfall 6, poor integration.
Addressed by making integration capability a key selection factor back in phase 1, and then actively working on those integrations post-launch to avoid data silos.
Pitfall 7, ignoring user feedback or resistance to change.
That's why involving stakeholders from the start is so vital. Open communication, actually listening to feedback, addressing concerns, and constantly showing the benefits to the users.
And the last one, Pitfall 8, neglecting continuous improvement.
The core of phase 3. If you don't keep reviewing, refining, monitoring KPIs, getting feedback, and staying updated, the system just fades away.
The message from the sources is crystal clear. Avoiding these pitfalls isn't luck. It's the result of following a structured, proactive approach through every stage.
Now let's zoom in on that specific area from the sources. Data governance, especially when facilities management is outsourced.
Right, this is a big deal. More companies are using integrated facilities management, IFM, outsourcing a lot of their maintenance, often to save costs. But the sources really stress the compliance risks this brings, particularly in regulated sectors like pharma or med device.
And it all comes down to data integrity.
Absolutely. When that outside provider does maintenance work in your regulated facility, they are generating GMP good manufacturing practice raw data. This isn't just paperwork, it's control data. Its integrity is the proof of service quality and ultimately your compliance.
It's what one source called the power of the A&D, getting cost savings and maintaining compliance.
Exactly. And that relies entirely on having trustworthy, transparent data governance around all that maintenance activity and the data it generates.
And the regulators are paying close attention. Sources mentioned increased focus from the FDA, MHRA in the UK, PICS internationally. That spike in FDA warning letters mentioning data integrity is pretty telling.
Yeah, this has shifted from being just a technical checkbox item like computer system validation to a much broader strategic quality risk. It's about overall data governance, especially when third parties are involved.
So you need robust governance, solid oversight, built on data you can actually trust. KPIs are great, but if the data feeding them is dodgy,
they're meaningless. Worse than meaningless, they could be misleading.
One source laid out a framework for data governance in this IFM context, mapping governance elements across 4 pillars: people, process, systems, and culture.
Yeah, it's a helpful way to think about it. So under people, it's about clear roles and responsibilities. Who owns the process on the client side? Who owns it on the provider side? People are key, but also where errors happen.
You need to think about behaviors, right? Like, could high overtime or backlog signal potential data shortcuts?
Exactly. And training, again, it can't just be click here. It has to cover why the data matters, its role as evidence. Leaders on both sides need to constantly reinforce that the data is the proof of service quality and compliance.
Okay, then process. This is about consistency. Service definition.
Yeah. Whose procedures are followed?
Yeah.
The client's SOPs or the provider's? That needs to be explicit. You need clear processes for things like data reviews, checking audit trails in the CMMS, handling deviations, retaining data, auditing the provider, giving feedback.
And knowing who truly owns the data.
Unambiguous data ownership is critical. And importantly, the culture should encourage the provider to flag potential issues they see without fear.
Next, systems. This is the tech side of data ownership.
Right. Which system is the official source of truth, the GXP record? If the provider uses their own system, how does data flow securely and accurately, especially from work done on-site, back to their system or yours?
This brings in things like computer system validation, CSV, making sure systems are fit for purpose in that regulated context.
Yes. Data mapping between systems, understanding the whole operating environment. And change control, any change to a system or process needs to be assessed specifically for its impact on data integrity.
What about shared storage, like for documents?
If you're using shared repositories, they need tight controls too. Protect data integrity, protect intellectual property, and make sure sensitive stuff, maybe commercial details or specific equipment info in the CMMS, is secure. And the final pillar, culture. This is about partnership.
Mutual goals and interdependent risk management. A true partnership means both sides see the shared risks, including data integrity risks, and work together to manage them. Setting up key risk indicators, KRIs, that both track.
And making risk management more than just a form-filling exercise. It needs to be about critical thinking, proactively looking for potential problems.
The big takeaway here seems to be that good data gives you confidence, especially in regulated decision-making. And getting data governance right with third-party providers isn't optional anymore.
It's becoming a fundamental expectation. Data integrity is a strategic risk, and data governance is how you manage it, whether maintenance is done in-house or outsourced.
Okay, so let's try and pull all this together. Successfully implementing and using a CMMS effectively, it's clearly way more than just installing software.
It really is. It demands that meticulous planning before you start, getting genuine buy-in and involvement from your people, focusing relentlessly on data accuracy right from the beginning.
Plus, dedicated, continuous training, thinking about integration with other systems, learning from the common mistakes others have made, and committing to continuous improvement after you go live.
It often feels less like a technical project and more like driving a cultural shift, doesn't it? Moving from maybe reactive, paper-based ways of working to a more proactive, digital, data-driven approach to maintenance.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, the core message from all these sources feels really consistent. CMMS success is a journey. Needs ongoing effort. It's not just flipping a switch.
Absolutely. It needs that careful planning, that stakeholder buy-in, the commitment to training, rigorous data management, and that mindset of continuous refinement.
And actively avoiding those common pitfalls we discussed seems like the key difference between success and becoming another statistic in that high failure rate. It's how you unlock the real benefits, efficiency, cost savings, reliability. And that data governance discussion, particularly with outsourcing, really highlights how critical data integrity is now. It goes beyond just the software. It affects your whole operation, your compliance, especially in regulated fields.
Which leaves us with maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Given this rising regulatory focus on data integrity and just the sheer complexity of managing facilities today, how can your organization proactively build a real culture of trust and accountability around maintenance data? A culture where everyone truly gets the value and the compliance impact of getting the data right, whether your maintenance team is internal or an external partner.